Wow. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen Clarkson. I'm CEO of Climate Group. And it's my job and my pleasure to welcome you to the next panel, which, as you can see, is all about the private sector leadership driving efficiency progress. So let's start by welcoming on stage our speakers for this session. Lars Peterson, Chief Executive Officer for Velux. Linda Pollson, Chief Executive Officer for AFRY. Satish Kumar, President of AEEE. And Ole Monkhansen, Chief Executive Officer for Rockwool. Welcome. Great. So as we start this, as I said, I'm Helen Clarkson. I'm CEO of Climate Group. We're a global non-profit organization. We work with businesses and governments to speed up climate action. Our mission is to drive climate action fast. And we do this particularly with private companies by working on the demand side with campaigns such as RE100, which is a global commitment to renewable electricity. And by aggregating that demand for renewable electricity from all the large companies, we can then send really clear signals into markets and to policymakers. And when we get that big demand signal from companies, we get these great shifts in markets, production goes up, but we also have to do a lot of work on policy and regulation. And so I'm really delighted to be here today to moderate the next two panels. So you've got quite a lot of me to come, I'm afraid, both of which are about this private sector leadership in energy efficiency. One of our campaigns is EP100, energy productivity. We had an idea a few years ago that we could rebrand energy efficiency, and that would make people love it. It probably hasn't shifted the needle in terms of people's love, and I think that some of that's what we want to talk about today is this is such a critical topic. How do we continue to get breakthroughs? We've had some really good results through that campaign. We've had over 125 ambitious businesses committing to doubling energy productivity, rolling out energy management systems, or achieving net zero carbon buildings. And between them, our members have saved over $1.7 billion US while reducing their emissions by more than the annual emissions of Brazil, which is over 450 million metric tons of CO2 equivalents. So I'm sure everyone here at this conference is really clear about the benefits of energy efficiency. I'm sure you've been hearing it all morning. I probably don't need to run through it again. The cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. It all goes straight to the bottom line. We've heard all of that. And in an era of tightening margins, shifting supply chains, intensifying climate risks, it's absolutely a no-brainer that we should be working really hard on energy efficiency. It's one of the fastest, most effective climate solutions we have. And we've got all these examples of businesses across the world showing that smarter energy delivers bottom-line benefits. So it's so obvious that I was almost like, why do we need a conference about it? But here we are, and we do need to keep pushing this conversation. As the IEA and others have pointed out, energy efficiency still remains a largely untapped opportunity. So despite this kind of waves of innovations and commitments, progress across so many sectors is still too slow, and too often these efficiency gains are incremental rather than transformative. So that's why we need to dig further to understand why that's the case and what can be done differently. And from our work on EP100, we can see that while there are exciting business case studies from businesses, that leadership doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it needs those right policies, it needs the ambitious targets, the investment conditions, and above all, collaboration across industry, government, and finance. And we've been working in a collaboration with companies on a project called Renovation Revolution, which brings together companies, subnational governments, and environmental sector NGOs to research and share findings on how we're going to drive up deep renovation rates in Europe's commercial and public buildings. And Velux and Rockwool have both partnered with us on the project. And with that project, we've been shining light on the latest energy efficiency innovations and exploring how governments and corporates can use those to scale up and drive down emissions in European buildings. And through that collaboration, we can start to uncover barriers, opportunities around how we can increase those renovation rates. So we're finding that key in collaboration and understanding how to get those deeper energy efficiency shifts needs a shift from one-off projects to that really system-level change. So scaling investment, aligning incentives, and creating frameworks that really reward performance. But that's not going to happen unless we prioritize collaboration and get the private sector involved. And so that's why I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of the panelists on this topic. So that's my sort of opening to this. I'm really pleased to be here. And so with that, I'm going to turn for some opening remarks to each of our 4 panelists. And let's start with you, Lars. Lars Peterson, Chief Exec of the Velux Group. Lars joined Velux in 2022 after serving as CEO of Hempel AS and brings experience from several global building materials companies, including Inwido and Target. Lars, let's hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining. And the Velux, we were actually born in the Second World War. We were born out of resource scarcity, attic conversion, finding spaces where we're not really existing today. We think we sell well-being. We're a well-being company. We provide, we feel good at home, but also physical well-being. I can develop on that during a coffee for anyone. But of course, we're also part of a built environment, and I've been part of a built industry for a long period. And we're 40% of energy consumption of Europe. We're 52% of Russian gas consumption of Europe, still, today. EU Commission told us. So, and it matters to every citizen of Europe, because where we live and where we work and where we play, it really has a real impact on our life. So that's what we're dealing with. And if I just give you 2 numbers, 85 and 75. 85 is that 85% of the buildings we will have in 2050, and for me 2050 is like I will be long retired. I hope I will be on the golf course still. In 2050, 85% of the buildings we have today the 85 buildings we have today will still be there. And okay, that's nice if you like old buildings like this one. And then another number, 75, is that 75% of the buildings we have in Europe today are really inefficient when it comes to energy. And some of them to a point that it's miserable for people living or spending time in them. So that's a challenge we are up against. And the good thing here is that in order to solve that challenge, we don't really have to think outside the box. we actually just have to reinvent the box. We took our own medicine. We built a new R&D center. We typically, people like us, we would have done a greenfield, fabulous building. Instead, we took an old existing wooden warehouse and turned it into innovation center. That saved us 55% of the material we otherwise would have used. So it can be done. Now, that's an individual example. Okay, nice example. Is that scalable? It's definitely scalable. One of the hardcore numbers I have is that 240,000 living places could be created in Germany alone if you just used the attics. And then if you add to that adding storage and using space, there's a huge potential in converting existing spaces into new energy efficient places. We fundamentally believe the technology is already there to create energy efficient, but also resource efficient, and more importantly, or equally important, a place which is affordable, sustainable, and where you actually want to live or spend your time. So now, if I'm just talking on the customer side of things, people say, what about you? Well, we take our own medicine. We actually like your EP100 rebranding.
Good.
We're using it. We have doubled our turnover with the same energy usage. We drive very hard on getting any gas out of our operations, drive energy efficiency up, because we can't preach or sell something we don't fundamentally act upon ourselves. I think that's important also. But my main message here is today that we need to do something which is people-centric. And I met with some ministers early this week, and I was a bit disillusionized because their voters, the citizens of Europe, they really want better places. And and we have a job to do that. And what we need from policymakers is clear guidelines, long guidelines. We are a slow industry. There are very ambitious companies in the industry, but we are slow and disconnected. So we need long-term guidelines. Think about this 2050 perspective. and then allow us to do their job because the technology is already existing. That would be my 5 cents.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's hear now from Linda Pollson. She was appointed President and CEO of AFRY earlier this year. Linda has extensive experience across the energy sector, having previously led AFRY's energy division as Executive Vice President and also held leadership roles at Triventus Wind Power and Infratech. Linda.
Thank you. And I will actually use this opportunity when you're on stage at EIA to use the speaker boat. So yes, as Ellen said, AFRY is an engineering company. We work with engineering advisory and project management across the globe. We are 18,000 experts working within energy industry and infrastructure. So we have a lot of insights across the businesses here related to this topic. Because energy efficiency is really critical for our future. It's actually one of the most powerful tools we have in the fight against climate change. It's been recognized globally, even highlighted by the final documents from the UN conference COP28 in Dubai. This calls for a doubling of the energy efficiency measures. But why is that so crucial then? Well, simply put, energy efficiency is not only about using less energy, it's also about enabling the global shift towards a cleaner energy. At the same time, balancing the increased electricity consumption driven by the decarbonization efforts around the globe. So from our perspective, energy efficiency has 4 key impact areas. The first comes from electrification of industrial processes. We see this in cement, we see this in steel, but also about the rapid electrification of the automotive sector. The second area is around all the existing assets that we have around the world. So industrial efficiency improvements that can actually help businesses around the globe operating smarter and unlocking the potential. And the third area is waste energy recovery. So when we repurpose energy, when we use it in adjacent industrial processes, or we use it in district heating systems. This is one area we work in integrated systems that connect industrial processes with energy distribution. And we see this as a growing trend around the globe. And number 4, improving energy production efficiency that actually can reduce grid losses and enhance production. And here comes storage solution into place, battery and pumped hydro playing a key role. And then if you take another angle of this equation then, it's how we can see that how energy users can support the system as a whole by reducing the peak demand or shifting their energy to off-peak times. This is actually a reminder that energy efficiency creates ripple effect throughout the value chain. And when it comes to implementing these measures, there are 3 main scenarios for this. Firstly, it's under new construction. Energy efficiency can and should be designed into the building or operation from the start. The second field is during renovation or upgrades. There is an opportunity to install more efficient equipment or enhance the existing systems. And then the last one is often the most trickiest one, and that's when there are standalone retrofits or replacements of existing assets. And this is actually where we come into the equation, because with decades of experience and deep sector expertise of the clean energy solutions, we partner with companies and communities to deliver tailored energy efficiency strategies. So energy efficiency is a challenge, yes, but it's also one of our greatest opportunities. And that's why I'm so happy that we are gathered here today to talk about this topic and see how we jointly can work together to ensure that we realize the commitments made at COP28. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Let's turn to Dr. Satish Kumar, President and Executive Director of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. A-E-E-E. Do you shorten it to that? Yes.
Yeah.
Previously, he was the Energy Efficiency Ambassador and led the energy management business at Schneider Electric, India.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, IEA, for the opportunity. So as Helen mentioned, I am representing Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. We have 85 members who are part of our platform, and many of them are European companies. And I know that many of European businesses are there. If you believe in energy efficiency, if you want to be active in India, I would love to actually have conversations with you. We work very closely with International Energy Agency. We were the lead organization for the G20 report that came out under India's G20 presidentship. I'm going to talk about a couple of segments. One is the industrial segment, where India has a very significant program called Perform, Achieve, and Trade. And then I will also touch upon a little bit on the possibilities and the potential that India offers to decarbonize its built environment and what kind of technologies are available. You talked about Velux, and I think those are the companies that can contribute in a significant way. Dan mentioned that I think when we are driving our car, when we are taking a shower, I think all these technologies are part of like our daily lives. And that's why energy efficiency is so powerful, because, and that's why we believe that we should create a culture and a market for energy efficiency. Renewable energy is important, all of us understand, but when it comes to daily interactions, it's the energy efficient technologies that affect our lives on a daily basis. So just building on the Perform, Achieve, and Trade sector, which is now getting converted into a carbon credit scheme that India has launched. So I'll just give some examples, and maybe I'll use some numbers, so pardon me for that. But this Perform, Achieve, and Trade program has been in effect for the last close to 15 years in India. And while some of the technologies are enabled by the companies, they are also pretty significant consumers of energy. And what has happened that over the last 14, 15 years, because of the efficiency investments that has been made by these companies in their manufacturing facilities, when I was at Schneider Electric, we used to have 18 companies, and every year we were trying to improve energy efficiency in those factories. So roughly about 50 million tons of oil equivalent, which is, if you think about India's total energy consumption, it's about 8% of India's total energy consumption has been saved through this program. Now, how big is 1 ton of oil equivalent, or how big is 1 million ton of oil equivalent? So let me give some numbers. 1 ton of oil equivalent, if you do unit conversion, it's like 11 megawatt hours. So it's a pretty large number. And 1 ton of oil equivalent, depending on whether you are using coal or oil, it will be about, say, 100 euro or about 300 euro. And 1 million ton of oil equivalent is going to be about 100 million to 300 million euros. So there is significant savings that government can demonstrate through this program. But the beauty of the program is it's not just the government, but it's actually getting implemented by companies who are working to produce these technologies. And we are just barely scratching the surface on this piece, because the carbon trading market is coming and all this energy can be translated into that. I'll just take a couple of minutes. So there are 4 segments: aluminum, cement, chloralkali, and pulp and paper. These are the 4 most energy-intensive industries that have been marked, which are going to transition to the carbon credit trading scheme for that. And before I wrap up, I just want to put some numbers out there. There has been a lot of discussions about the built environment. India is perhaps the country where there is maximum construction happening right now. It's about 1 billion square meters of construction that is happening every year. And out of that, cement, steel, and bricks. Bricks people are not aware, but these are the 3 big building materials which are almost like 80% of embodied carbon that is going into the Indian construction sector is happening through that. So a lot of technologies can be deployed. Of course, we talk a lot about cement and steel, but in India, if you can come up with better technologies that will start to replace bricks, that is a significant opportunity there as well. And also, India is also one of the countries which is putting equal emphasis on embodied carbon plus operational carbon, because our embodied carbon is almost like 40 to 50% of the total carbon that is coming out of the built environment. So it's a great time to be in India. A lot of, I think, innovation, a lot of possibilities, a lot of positive momentum in terms of policy and regulations, and many, many technologies that can be deployed. So I'll pause here. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. And let's turn to Ole Monkhansen, President and CEO of Rockwool since 2024. Ole brings a wealth of international leadership experience, including CEO positions at Terma Group, Osram, and LED Advance. Sorry. Yes.
Thank you very much.
I stop ruining your company name.
No, that's
fine. I'll hand over to you.
You got my first name right, but that's very difficult. Yeah, Rockwool is a global player in the building materials industry, and we basically take stone and we melt it and turn it into wool and use that for insulation. So we are mostly known for our insulation products. As the colleague just mentioned a few numbers on the construction industry and how much CO2 is embedded in the construction industry and how much the buildings consume. We, of course, are very interested in this agenda, and this has always been an integrated part of our agenda. Depending where you are in the world, 30 to 40% of energy consumption goes into buildings in one way or another. And this is, of course, not only a big business opportunity, I am a CEO, but of course also a big responsibility that we would like to be part of solving. There's one observation I would like to share with everyone. As I travel here to Brussels every now and then, I have seen quite a big shift in how the energy efficiency agenda is articulated and on what political base that agenda stands. And I think it's been quite noticeable the last 6 months that the energy efficiency agenda stands on a much broader base than it did a few years ago, and that the understanding of the energy efficiency agenda and the many positive effects that it can bring to society is getting clearer and clearer to politicians. So I'm quite optimistic that we now have a good platform. And let me elaborate on that. Of course, we all came from the environmental side of the argument, from the CO2 side and from the global warming side. But when I meet with politicians, and it's not just in Brussels, it is worldwide, is that competitiveness plays such an important role. And the fundamental understanding of, as was mentioned also before, that the energy you don't consume is saved. So for an operator, a manufacturing like me, Lean and Kaizen, which are tools that we use every day, it's almost as if it's spreading into the politics, an understanding that saving resource is simply good business. And let me, there's also a word of warning to the Europeans here. Don't think that we're ahead of the game in Europe. For instance, I see much more investments going into this in the US, where the dollar counts and where CO2 reduction simply is directly linked to money. And that drives the business. So competitiveness at large, a super important agenda. I'll get back to that in a second. Then, of course, the energy independence that, again, with European eyes, very much is around Russian gas, and that's understandable. But an understanding of that is the fastest way to get off dependency of Russian gas or other. And that is also not only in the EU that conversation is going on, but the understanding that on the demand side, we can move faster and more efficient, also financially, than on the supply side, is something that resonates extremely well with politicians these days. And then I think there's a very, very important social agenda that is becoming more and more widespread and understood. When it comes to renovating buildings, and I'm sorry, I come from the building side of this, renovating buildings and bringing buildings up to a modern building standard is involving a lot of small and medium-sized companies. And it's very, very local. So the funding and the activities are very much out there, as almost hands-on as it can be, and will hence have the biggest macroeconomic factor also in those segments. And then last but not least, there's the whole energy poverty side of it. Maybe something that we don't feel here in this audience, but it is a huge issue, not just in Europe again, but worldwide. How many people simply spend too much a share of their disposable income on energy. So when we bring all these things together, I think we stand on a very, very strong political platform. And then, of course, we shouldn't forget about the CO2 and the climate, but it is a much broader and stronger place we stand when we argue for the cause here. And that's where I then also want to stress my last point, and that is, again, that the technologies we need to make this happen, at least in the sector I represent, are readily available. This is not technologies we need to go out and invent or infrastructure we need to build. I mean, renovating a building is something that can be done with, of course, insulation, but it's windows, it's pumps, it's compressors, it's LED lighting. They're readily available globally. And then also, again, to the European audience, they're readily available in Europe. Okay? It's not technologies where we're dependent on other continents. We have them here, and we are companies who can produce them also locally. So like my previous colleagues, I think it is important to say to the political arena that with this very broad political agenda and with all these benefits to society, it's super helpful if the politicians, of course, give clear directions and clear standards on what they expect. And then we as industry are more than happy and more than willing to invest. I can tell you, we right now, I have 5 factories that we are building in Europe. We have a couple in India, a couple in North America. And this is an industry in a down market where we're investing into because we believe so much that this is coming. So there's a lot of willingness and ability to innovate and to allocate capital to this super important political agenda.
Great, thank you. I want to pick up there actually, because not just because I'll grab onto any optimism I can find, which I will in all of this debate, but let's start there with sort of discussion. You know, listening to you, that's perfect. Energy efficiency, its days come. You know, we're ready to go. But we've had a lot of these arguments around for a long time. So what are the barriers? You know, I think in terms of system change, what you're trying to do often is identify barriers and then find the enablers. So I think you're right. There's one, which is that the language, political language, is now maybe catching up. But let's start with, you know, Velux and Rockwool. Both of you are on both sides of this, right? Selling products and, as you say, taking your own medicine. Sort of, what are the barriers that are stopping you doing things as a company or stopping that you see in the market? Are they lack of products? Is it the wrong policy? What do we need to overcome to build on this moment that we've got in order to create change? Lars, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it is a really good question, and I was meeting with some fellow building material suppliers and some dealers in UK, and I know we maybe talk more Europe than UK here, but and I'm not sure we have all the answers to that question. What's actually preventing us? Because we see a lot of good examples out there, and I think there were a lot of good examples shared here today. The technology is there. So is it about investments? Of course, the dollar drives the world for sure. So it's about creating incentives to make it happen. Is it about knowledge? I don't think so. The knowledge seems to be there. Of course, from a policy point of view, all we want is clear guidelines. You know, we have the energy performance of a buildings directive. It's been approved. Roll it out. Yeah. Make sure it happens. And then stay at it for 10 years. There could be a need also, not for companies like us, but for the end consumer, the end user, to get some subsidies or to get some access to knowledge. We would be happy to share ours in some good shape or form. Unfortunately, I think you have to look at the full system to get this system, because we're renovating maybe 1% of buildings today. It needs to be 3, 4, 5 in order for us to have any chance of shooting at 2040 targets, etc. So I think I would easily put my resources into something where we actually ask ourselves that question a little bit more seriously and try to get the bottlenecks out of the system.
Yes, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, when it comes to policy, of course, it super quickly becomes very regional. So I'm sorry for the global audience that we're talking Europe now. But in Europe, we have, for those who don't know, a new directive called the Energy Performance of Building Directive, the so-called EPBD, that has been passed here half a year ago, and now gets implemented out in the countries. I think it's a point also for the rest of the world, because making a central decision in Brussels doesn't move the needle at all. The work that is happening right now is each individual country turning these directives into actionable plans and funding plans in the individual countries. And we do follow it very closely. And I'm quite impressed by some countries, how fast they have moved on implementing the directive. And one of the countries, so we don't always talk about France and Germany, one of the countries that I do highlight is a country like Romania. When I see what Romania has done in a very, very short period of time, and how ambitious they are around renovating their their building mass, and how they fund it together with help from Brussels and the European Investment Bank, those are the cases that we have to nurse and help further. And it's absolutely doable, and that's also why I have this optimism around it. So politics are good, but at the end of the day, it has to be actionable plans, and in this case, the EPBD.
Great. I'm going to go and look up Romania when we get out of here. I like good examples that I can build on. Satish, let's sort of pick that up. You support policy implementation at your work. From your experience, how can governments engage with industry, and how can industry engage with the government on moving these issues forward?
Yeah, so I think there is a pretty good chemistry between the government and the industry in India, because if you think about, I mentioned the PAT program, where the targets that are being set for the different industries and also for the different units, that's a collaborative process. And so government says that these are the energy-intensive industries. We would like to reduce the specific energy consumption. And I think together with the government, the industries actually come out with the numbers. And then the industry moves forward and sort of implements that. So same thing, I would say, with appliance standards. Appliance standards, of course, I think it's a pretty powerful policy tool around the world. But what we have also seen recently is that government is starting to push the industry a little harder, especially on appliance standards like cooling appliances, so for room air conditioners, for ceiling fans, because these are the appliances that are consuming about 50 to 60% of the total energy consumption that is happening from the residential sector. So India understands that, I think we have to do that. And one other, I think, new development is that the government is also asking the industry whether we have the critical technology that would allow us to bring the prices down. So are we really dependent on importing some of the technologies, whether it's compressors, whether it's BLDC motors? And they are trying to build the, I think, domestic capacity by investing more money into the manufacturing side. So it's not, and this is something that AEEE is also pushing, that don't just make policies like codes and standards, but also look at the supply side, because you cannot just ask the consumers or the developers to meet the codes and standards when, I think, affordable technology is not available. So I think this is a new realization, and we are also saying that divert some of the government resources to help the private sector or the innovators or the foreign, I think, companies who are willing to put technologies in place. So it's these kind of things that we are doing. And one last point is that there is a pretty significant effort on decarbonizing the building sector. So India's policy think tank, Niti Aayog, has undertaken this exercise. And building, of course, in India also consumes about 40%. And there also they are saying that let's focus on operational carbon, but let's not forget about embodied carbon. Let's focus on codes and standards, but let's not focus on the supply side challenges that India is facing. So I think in the geopolitics of things, and I think in the China Plus model, that is, I think all those things are in play. And government is definitely reaching out to companies with better technologies to see, I think, how India can benefit and partner with them.
Great. And Linda, at AFRY you talk about sustainability being an integral part of business strategy and a strong driving force. Can you say a bit about how that commitment has driven progress within AFRY, please?
Absolutely. Well, being a service company, our own emissions is mainly coming from business travel and the offices that we sit in. Of course, we do everything to reduce that, both by reducing space and energy efficiency measures. But our greatest impact is actually through our assignments, because this is what we do. We give advice around technical solutions. So, of course, when you design something from scratch, something new, we make sure that it's the highest standard, available standards in terms of technology. And that's quite easy, I would say, when it's new construction. You do that from the beginning. But what we see now is also when companies rebuild or repurpose their facilities, there's a huge opportunity now, also from a business case perspective, because there is, you know it's energy insecurity, rising prices. Now is the time when you should rethink your operational processes to really implement energy efficiency measures. So a lot is around that. I would say a lot is also around really making use of the excess heat from industrial processes. Data centers, we heard our commissioner talking here this morning, that's really a lot of untapped potential if you just let that out. Use it in the district heating systems and so on. So it's about connecting different solutions across different production lines and distribution lines. I'm actually quite happy, because we have talked about there are technical solutions, but there are also the technical knowledge. And now also I think there's awareness around these topics. So that's how we work with it on an everyday basis.
Yes.
I fully echo what you say. And I think this is a huge opportunity for business. And again, I apologize, I come from the business side. But the higher the standards are set, the bigger the expectations are to the products and services we deliver, the more we will collect around innovation. So you want examples? 15 years ago, both here in the EU, but also in the US particularly, there were new legislation around lighting, where you were no longer allowed. Well, actually, that's not how they did it. You had new standards for lumen output per watt, which meant that you were not allowed anymore to produce and sell the old incandescent light bulb we all know. And I was in that industry, and that completely restructured the industry. And we had to reallocate capital, and it was painful, and we innovated, and we changed our supply chains, but we did it. And now today, I hope nobody considered buying an incandescent light bulb today. And I think there's a small case, an interesting case for how standards can be applied and how industry then rallies around these solutions. And I truly believe it's a commercial opportunity. So it maybe sounds strange that a CEO sits and argues for stricter standards. And it's maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but it gives companies who are willing and able a chance to innovate also in their own footprint. And we do that a lot. We see that it's expensive right now, but we see it as a competitive advantage in the long run, because we don't consume as much ourselves, but also, of course, because we see there's a market for it.
To Lars's point, though, then the key is for politicians not to change that standard again in 2 years' time. And that's, I think, one of the struggles we've had, is these things continually changing. Yeah. And I think there's a role for corporates in there as well, to not have your regulation people always arguing against regulation. So we've seen it where companies who are getting a competitive advantage from the regulation haven't really told their corporate affairs people who are off sort of campaigning against. So there's, it's working all that through, isn't it, as well? Yeah. Yes, jump in, and then we're going to do a very quick fire finish. But
it was just to jump in on that. I think, Satish, you had a very important point also about affordable standards. So I agree with Jess, we need to set standards right, so we standardize on good technology. But we also, as an industry, have to figure out how we do that in an affordable way. Otherwise, it becomes splendid, lovely buildings for corporates, etc. But in the real life, nothing happens. So I think that's important. And And also, if I may swear in the church, is also, of course, the equation has also the cost of energy. So the lower the cost of energy, the less incentives to do energy efficiency. And yeah, I just think it's a fact on the table. So if you want to, you have to work with affordability of the improvement solution and work on the cost of energy. And maybe, you know, it's a bit more populistic to say we need to lower the cost of energy, but if we really want to drive energy long term.
Interesting.
And I think you have a very important point when it comes to deregulation. It's also a very popular thing to say these days, and it's absolutely true. We spend more effort and money filling in reports on immaterial matters than we spend on actually improving. And that needs to change. But on the other hand, of course, in the built environment and many other environments, there needs to be standards. And when better technology is available, like you give example, of course, we need to raise the standards and put some pressure on all of us to raise the bar. So unfortunately, when we talk regulations, we need to be able to have two thoughts in our mind. Take away was just bureaucracy, but put standards high when it really drives progress, unfortunately.
And I think I completely agree, and I think it's unfortunate. As soon as you say regulation, everyone sort of slightly slumps, but it's actually so important in this area. We're out of time officially, but let's do a very quick last bit of advice to people who are here about how we can drive progress, and let's come along the line.
It's more a request to everyone. I think it's super important that we help politicians in communicating this. Energy efficiency cannot be communicated as an austerity measure. Because if that gets communicated like that, the regular, citizen has to cut down on their lifestyle or, how they live, then we'll see a political backlash. This has to be communicated well, that this is not about changing lifestyle, but this is about, in our case, better houses, better living, and using our resources better. That is absolutely critical that we all help the politicians, because if they can't communicate that, then we will see a backlash against this movement.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I have, at AEEE, we use a construct called lean, mean, green, and seen. And I'll just take 30 seconds to explain it. Lean is basically that you design any system, any buildings from the first principles. And by doing that, you can bring down the load on the structure or the system. Mean is all about energy efficiency. So you can buy all the wonderful technology that we have, whatever allows you. So that's the second piece. The third piece is use renewable energy to meet the demand. I think once you have done that. And the fourth is show the performance, validate the performance, put it out in the public domain, that this sequence of things work. So I think this generic thing can be applied to any system, any building design, and we think it's a powerful construct, and it helps create the narrative that is easily understood by people, politicians, companies. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Well, I would urge, I think, all industrial owners and facility owners to review their processes. There might be an untapped potential there, and the business case might very well be there to implement any efficiency measures.
Great, thank you. Lars.
Keep the citizens, keep the people in the center of what we do, so it becomes a long story and not the waves we have suffered the last years, because if we do, then we build long-term value for our citizens. We will be fine. Technology already exists, so let's keep people in the center.
Perfect. Well, please join me in thanking the panel for everything they've said and the optimism that they've shown, and thank you very much. Now, as I said, you've got a lot of me this morning. The panel's going to leave, and I'm going to welcome on seamlessly the next panel. And one of our panelists, I think Linda there just mentioned at the end, the business case for sustainability. We didn't put her up to it, but it's a seamless transition into our next panel, which is all about the business case for energy efficiency. So I'm hoping everyone is ready. I can vaguely see. I'm going to please join me in welcoming to the stage Ditte Jorgensen, Director General for Energy from the European Commission.